Another day, another episode. This is the Psychedelic Coach Podcast. I'm your host, Kole. Today, we're going to dive into a crucial conversation around what substance when. Now, this is totally generalized. So a lot of what I'm sharing is coming from a recording from a coaching call like 4 years ago. So some of my perspectives have slightly changed, but I feel like nonetheless, this is when I was full-time facilitation mode, having loads of experience every single weekend. And I really explore the frameworks when choosing or considering the right master teacher plant or plant medicine for you or for specific situations, or just helping you to consider. But again, you got to use that noodle noggin on top of your shoulders to make your decisions. This is just more information. And of course, I want to take a moment to thank Ka Empathogenics. Ka is a company rooted in the healing wisdom of indigenous communities. They're really focused on the harmony between the head and the heart. And I truly think this is the next generation of supplements for humanity to feel more vital and alive, help them navigate everyday anxiety and stress. That's what it's been doing for me. And Ka is known as the happiest plant on earth. Make sure you check the contraindications for any medications you're on. Very important. This is a legal psychoactive master teacher that I'm obsessed with. Get 10% off in the show notes, and I will see you inside.
Whether you're a life coach, therapist, biohacker, invested in wellness, or in the healthcare profession, if you have an intention to work in psychedelic spaces, you're in the right place then. If you're called, get involved. But first, get informed. Let's talk the 4 N's: intake, intention, in-space integration, leading to deeper transformations. Psychedelic Coach Podcast, Talk Kole. Walk you through the process, it's all possible. Leave space for the follow through. Most importantly, integration is not optional.
Some of the most common conversations that we get into is, which plant medicine should I use when, or which one for which person under which situations? And so it's a really important conversation because there's really no framework out there. There's really nowhere that says, hey, if someone's going through this kind of trauma, then this kind of power plant might be more supportive. Or if this is going on in their physical body, don't use this plant or environment. And I'm going to start just by giving some super general guidelines, and then we're just going to talk. I do the best in conversation as far as like recall, and sometimes I don't know what people don't know because I've been doing this for so long. So here's some generalizations, and keeping in mind these are complete generalizations. If someone's having mold toxicity, their adrenals, like adrenal fatigue, even a lot of immune conditions where overall their system's hyperactive and fighting itself. So autoimmune conditions, things like that. The things I typically want to stay away from is high dose, anything that's very hard on the body. Also, like ayahuasca. I wouldn't recommend, if somebody's body is very fatigued, putting them into either a high dose or a very physically intensive experience, right? Because think about it, something like ayahuasca where someone could be purging, if their body is already exhausted, if they're already tired in their life, then having them go that direction, even if it's good for their mind, and I say good as in they get the results that they want as far as realizations, for their physical body, it could put them back a year or even 2. And so a really common thing that I see is someone will go down to Costa Rica. They'll do 3 days of ayahuasca. Their body was already fatigued. They were already having some weird rashes or eczema or things showing up in the skin. That this is why the intake process is so powerful, because through the intake and medical history, you can see where they've been, things in the past that might have impacted their physical health, and then what's going on in their body right now. And again, this isn't an always situation, but it's common enough that someone will go down to Costa Rica. They'll do the 3 or the 5 day ayahuasca sessions, have huge breakthroughs and demons and purging and darkness and all of this stuff. And then they have a health crash shortly after. And really, they've been in fight or flight for a long time. And this is ultimately bringing their body to a break. It's now too much too fast. okay, they had the realizations, but then the body afterwards completely shuts down. And then a year to 2 years for someone to rebuild their physical health in a way that is sustainable, and their mental health as well, because it's a lot. Think about it like if someone is in a job they don't like, a relationship they don't want to be in, a state that they don't want to live in, all of this thing, and then they go into a psychedelic experience and a bunch more stuff gets unraveled, then it like the visualization I get. Have you ever seen in cartoons where they like cram everything in the closet and then they go to open it and it all just like flies out everywhere and like explodes? That's what I see happen a lot, is people will go into a big expansive experience, especially with a lot of energies, a lot of people in the space. And they'll have more realizations only to realize they're even further from either their health, their wealth, what they need than they realized. So now they go into overwhelm. They've already been in fight or flight for a long time. And this is adding to the pile of stuff that they have to dig themselves out of. So if someone's been in a heightened state or for a long time in fight or flight, then what I want is to probably bring in something slow and slight and really get into nuance, because anyone that's been suffering doesn't want to slow down, right? They don't want to wait. They want to get it through it right now. And the most common personalities, type A, high performance, where they're like, what do we need to do? How much do I need to take to just knock through this thing and just bust through on the other side? So I'll go down, I'll do ayahuasca for 10 days in the jungle. Then I'll be through all my trauma and I can get back to work. And so it's a very common practice. It doesn't really work that way. Even if someone has the realization, that is not the application or the integration of what they know. Does that make sense for y'all? Give me a thumbs up as far as, I know a few of you just popped in, so don't worry if you're still catching up. So if someone has a lot of autoimmune conditions, a very sensitive body, this is why asking questions around if they're sensitive to caffeine. Are you sensitive to other types of substances, maca, matcha? When you can check some of these other herbs, if they're overly sensitive to really substances in general or alcohol, then starting them lower dosages. Again, I'm not suggesting this is what anyone should do. I'm sharing general information from my experience. But starting low dose, because if someone's sensitive, you can't subtract. Okay. It's just that's not a possibility. The thing is, the problem that comes with lower dose is when someone has a very strong mind, they really don't like the feeling of losing control, because they're not actually losing control yet, because they haven't taken enough for it to be stronger than them, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? So it can be more agitating for people. That's why having the conversations ahead of time, that if you're very sensitive and going, hey, we're going to start you off slow and build you in. Why? Because that's the way that we do it. Too much too fast is traumatizing too. And if you're not equipped, if you're not trauma informed, if you don't have grounding techniques and ways to help people integrate, if they're extra altered, you're going to really have a problem on your hands. And my general rule of thumb, for example, is starting someone on a microdosing protocol. If you're not familiar with them, if it's not someone that has a lot of rapport, someone that really trusts you, then starting them and see how they handle it. For some people, they don't want to go slow. They want to go harder, faster, more now. But you may also find that through this process, it's not someone you're ready to support in navigating through something. So what I'll usually do, or I'll start someone with, say, a half a gram of mushrooms of a Brazilian or Amazonia, something like that, and see how they fare. Give it a good hour and a half. See how they're handling it, and then perhaps add another gram. But someone's first time, I typically won't do more than that. And again, that depends on the species. It depends like what type. That all varies. One of the most important things I don't hear talked about, and I feel that especially when someone's newer to facilitating, is getting the same source, the same mushroom, and experiencing it yourself don't send somewhere you haven't been. Or don't send someone somewhere you haven't been. Because if they have landscapes or things that you don't understand, they will immediately pick up that you don't know what's going on. And there is a process of teaching your own nervous system and your own body not to pass on if you're uncertain. Because if you're uncertain and you're holding space for someone and they feel that uncertainty, then panic comes in. Once panic comes in, the logic ceiling drops down and they don't have the same ability to access their tools and think clearly and all of that stuff. And so many things can be thwarted by having the onboarding process and having open dialogue of what happens when. If you feel unsafe, how can I remind you that you are? Do you have a talisman or an object or something like that to hold? Do you journal? Do you bringing someone out of their head and into their heart? Bringing up something that they love. If they have an animal or a child, it's distracting them. If they get into a loop, into something that they're very connected to. We'll talk about that in more detail another time. But going back to, if someone's been having a lot of health problems, not ayahuasca, not high dose psilocybin, even not MDMA, unless their physical health is pretty good, pretty healthy. And then obviously medications. And medications even is a bit of a different conversation. But as far as SSRIs, low blood pressure, if you have low blood pressure and you're going to journeys, taking salt pills before your journey can actually really help to stabilize your blood pressure if you have low blood pressure. So just a FYI with that. That's why for us, we also stress electrolytes, because your mineral depletion through these processes can what cause someone to black out, pass out, or just drop from low blood pressure. And we'll do a whole session just on safety protocols. But if their health has been very sensitive, asking them how they've done with edibles. I think that marijuana has been massively underused as a journey tool. I actually know quite a few people that use it for journeying specifically, but people tend to have, not everyone, but more people have a comfort with marijuana. And so even having edibles, but setting an intention, sitting in circle, all of doing the same practices will bring in the same energy as with other plants or these other paramedicines.
So on the ayahuasca being too strong for someone going through physical stuff, where do you fit combo into that equation, in the sense that maybe combo would clear some of the stuff out potentially that is the root cause of the physical stuff? What's your take on that?
Yeah. Then it becomes a kind of a case by case basis, right? So, and it comes down to how they're feeling right now, and then having honest conversation. At the end of the day, for me, it's about sovereignty and the person being educated and then making a decision for themselves. For me, I don't have to agree with someone's decision. I do want them to be educated as much as possible beforehand. So for me, it goes first to asking the intention. What do they believe, perceive, or understand the benefit could be for what they're experiencing? And this is with anything, DMT, ayahuasca, whatever. Because if they're assigning that something outside of them is going to heal them versus create an environment for the body to heal itself, then you may find that they'll go journey hopping weekend to weekend. They're doing Cambo one weekend, DMT the next weekend, and that doesn't give the body enough time to recalibrate, because the body's process oriented, right? So if someone goes and has an expansive experience, then they expand outward and then they contract inward. Now, it's not always like a hormonal or emotional or depressed feeling with a contraction, but the body, after experiencing something so big, requires a little bit of time to be able to integrate the experience and kind of catch up to the spiritual or mental shifts that have occurred. So the questions ahead of time will tell you a lot with that, because even with ayahuasca, I'll sit and have a conversation with someone and say, I wouldn't recommend starting there. And then we'll go through the conversation. They'll be like, look, this is what I'm called to do. And I'm like, At the end of the day, you need to trust yourself. That's what's most important for me, is someone to trust themselves and what they're called to. For me, what a facilitator is to bring ease, to facilitate a process. Now, as a facilitator, to serve multiple things, I think is not ideal, because it's really getting to know one thing at a time first, whether it's mushrooms, whether it's ketamine, whether it's DMT, whatever it is. I find a lot of facilitators start facilitating all of it, and it's playing a bunch of instruments, right? They can play a couple chords of a bunch of instruments, but they haven't actually learned how to read sheet music or how to construct a song or to orchestrate. And there is a difference. There's not a right or wrong, but to truly guide people, understanding even one at a time for at least a year. Give yourself a year to really understand the nuance of one specifically, makes a huge difference, because it literally turns into, I can walk into a space and feel what plant people took, because there's a different feeling to each one, because there's a different frequency. But that's because I've experienced it, so my body can tap into it. Just if someone comes in with certain trauma, I can feel myself in them. I can feel my trauma in them, right? And so it's a similar thing. So it comes down to, as well, does someone as a facilitator want to guide people deeper into themselves, and how far? Or do they want to just hold space for someone to go in? Or do they, that's why we talked about on the last day, all the ways you can hold space for people. And then it comes down to clearly communicating that from the get-go. I'm here just to make sure your physical body is safe. I'm not going to give you anything. I will sit here with you should you choose to take something. That's what I'm here to do. Or I'm here to help you integrate your experiences. I'm not here to recommend what you should or shouldn't do. Here's some resources, and let's talk about what you're drawn to and what's drawing you to it. And I think that no matter what frameworks we use, at the end of the day, if someone's called to something, they're called to it. And it's not for anyone to decide if that's right or wrong. It's an education thing for me personally. So here's one thing that I do see very commonly. People that went to college or very challenging medical schools or anything like that had I would say, residency type intensive schooling, and got into, here's the sequence I see. They did Adderall in their college years, maybe Coke, but Adderall for sure for studying and to keep up with their life. Kratom later on, and then they get into RAPÈ. There's this sequence. If someone used Adderall, then they usually will like RAPÈ. And the thing or RAPÈ is a tobacco that people blow up their nose, or they have blown up their nose. You have to understand that it's like the equivalent of 10-ish cigarettes at once. So it's important to know that, because if someone's had addictive tendencies with tobacco, with Adderall, with cocaine, with uppers and stimulants, which is usually high performers, type A, entrepreneur, like that kind of harder, faster, more now Puma energy, tend to love Kratom and tend to love RAPÈ or HAPE. And again, it comes down to an education thing, because what I'm starting to see a lot is that even with something like RAPÈ, people are using it on a daily basis. The thing is, your nose is not designed to have dust blown up it. That's why you have nose hair. It's a very sensitive area in your body. And so if someone is even using this power plant, it's not any different than cigarettes. Tobacco is a sacred grounding teacher plant. And when overused, impacts your breathing and impacts other things. So is the case with HAPE and RAPE, regardless of how smooth, regardless of what kind. And so if you're noticing someone starting to have this kind of, every time you talk to them, they have this clogged nose thing, like they have a cold. I can tell which people in Austin, by the way, are regular RAPE users just from talking to them on the phone. Because after I talk to them the third time, and I just hear them talking like this, they're like, yeah, so it is so good to see you. It's because they literally can't breathe because they have so much stuff in their face. Okay. So these are things that when you personally try or introduce, knowing that it is highly addictive, actually, not just literally, but sensation wise, because it gets them, grounds them right in their body. So there is a limit to all things as far as it being functional or dysfunctional for a person. So again, I just like to educate people, and the sooner you can educate and just be in open dialogue with people and just asking them why. You don't need to know everything. And that's also an important thing to know when it comes to asking questions. Ask someone what's driving them to do something or to choose something, and just listen. And then you'll start to see the drivers of the choices that they're making. And from there, you can really start to see what's going on underneath, because journeying is beautiful and it's powerful. And without actionable steps and plans afterward, it's like asking a prayer all of the time and not leaving any space for an answer. Always asking God, the universe, just asking for something, and there's actually no steps being taken truly. And so that's a few of my thoughts around substances. My preferred substances that are the safest, and I say safest as far as don't have as many medical concerns with medical conditions, San Pedro or Wachuma is probably my favorite, because it overall is the safest, and I say in air quotes because it's relative, as far as not having adverse reactions with medications, other than being mindful if someone has diabetes or, like I said, high blood pressure, low blood pressure, heart conditions, seizures, those kinds of things. I really don't recommend anyone do until they have worked 6-7 years in it at least, and at least 1,000 people, because even that took Tal and I quite a while, and he's an emergency medicine nurse. You know what I mean? Before we would really start to work with people that there could be potential risk. Because the other thing to keep in mind, and something that I don't hear talked about very often, is from a facilitator perspective, there's also a tremendous amount of not just legal risk because of any substances, but because of medical issues and sexual misconduct, we'll say. I've actually not only held space for people that were accused of being predatory and holding space for dialogue, but also people that felt that the facilitator was putting sexual energy on them. And as a general practice as well, having one facilitator and one person, especially if it's male, female, is not a great idea. Again, there's always exceptions and stuff like that. But I have witnessed and been in containers. It hasn't with us. We had one woman one time that was pretty sure that Todd's sexual energy, that they had a lot of sexual energy between them. And he's like, are you sure that wasn't just your sexual energy versus our sexual energy? And so because people are altered and if their trauma comes up, they start to view the world through that traumatized lens, which means their logic ceiling has lowered because they're coming from more of a fear space where they're not able to access the same rational part of the brain. And so they can create stories that are quite concerning if it's someone that you don't really know. And so whether or not you're sitting for someone, even if you're not giving them anything, being really mindful to not be alone with people that you really don't know, that you aren't 1,000% comfortable with, and clearly communicating what touch looks like or doesn't look like. As a general rule, I don't touch people during journeys, because my energy, just by touching someone, you can pull them out of their experience. You can spin them out into an experience. You can call in other energies. And so unless I'm doing a private, or they are completely back in their body and we can see each other and they ask, hey, can you hold me? And even still, If someone says, "Can you hold me?" and I can see they're very altered, I may for a second and then tell them, "You got this. I'm here. You need to do this on your own," and have them go back in their experience. Because again, if someone has a memory come up and you're touching them in any kind of way, they can mix the memory and you. And that becomes a new thing. And so I can't stress this enough that especially at first, even if you're an energy worker, even if you're a body worker, even if you're whatever, don't touch someone. Just don't. Get used to the spaces and tell people, I will not touch you. That's just where I am right now. If you need something, I will be here. I will hold your hand if necessary, but that is the limit for me personally. That's where the boundary is for me. Especially males, I highly encourage you the most to uphold that until you are really comfortable and really sure who you're holding space for, because it can get tricky really quickly. Not only that, power dynamics that can come into play for any gender, someone can start playing out a dynamic between a parent. And so if you come in as the rescuer to hold someone, you can actually support their coping mechanism. And it's not bringing sovereignty or personal power, personal empowerment. And communicating that from the beginning lets people know that it's happening so that they don't feel abandoned. If you try to tell someone this during an experience, you can create trauma because now you're not there for them and they can feel abandoned. So the clearer you can communicate through these experiences, regardless of what plant, will make a difference.
All right, so check it. You already know about the Condor approach, but did you know we have a one-day event coming up in Spanish Fork, Utah, August 1st? We're going to chat about uncovering the secrets of psychedelic integration to stay safe, connected, and fulfilled. If you want to discover how to navigate your psychedelic experiences with precision so that every step you take is aligned with your intentions and desired outcomes, this event is for you. It's just one day. Lunch is included. If you want to learn about the first thing you could do when you return home after a big experience, or why so many people slide backwards after a few weeks or months, how to find the right facilitator for you, the process that you're in, what questions to ask, how to share your wisdom and insights with those around you in your community, how to bridge the gap from the Western medicalized models and these ancient practices, your own unique framework that goes beyond just traditional methods or medicalized methods, and how to take your integration skills to the next level so that you can be a catalyst for change in the lives of others around you and really help to destigmatize and educate your community, then this is for you. So again, August 1st, admission is $297. We go from 9:30 a.m. until 7 p.m. in Spanish Fork, Utah. It's going to be an amazing event. If you want more information, I want to send it to you. So head on over to Instagram, The Condor Approach. Shoot me a message whether you want to come to the Condor Approach, a one-day event, or you're not sure. You're like, Kole, I don't know. You do all of the things. I get it. So book a call with me. Yes? Or you can go to learnmore.coach. Book a call with me. We can go over all the things and find the right fit for you. Let's get back to the episode.
Integration is not optional.